Let me read to you a passage from the first chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 67 to 79. It's the Gospel for December the 24th in the morning of December the 24th. St. Luke writes, "His father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied, 'Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come and has redeemed his people. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago. Salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare a way before him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace.'" That's from Luke chapter 1, verses 67 to 79, for the morning of December the 24th. What does it suggest to us? Well, it is Zechariah's prophecy, of course. What do I mean? Well, it is agreed that Luke was a Gentile convert, but he displays a great knowledge of Hebrew history, its scriptures, and its story of salvation. One of the interesting things or features of the first chapter of St. Luke's Gospel is that a brief survey of this sacred history is presented as a prophecy. I refer to our Gospel today that I've just read. The person of the Holy Spirit is introduced 4 times in the first chapter, and our passage today is part of the first chapter. The angel Gabriel tells Zechariah that his child will be filled with the Holy Spirit from the womb, and then he announces to Mary that the Holy Spirit will come upon her. As a result, her child will be called the Son of God. The other 2 references to the Holy Spirit are the visitations of the Holy Spirit on Elizabeth and on Zechariah. When Mary arrives at the house of Zechariah, we read that Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit, and she spoke with a loud voice, praising the Virgin Mary and her unborn child. Then, when John is born, Zechariah is filled with the Holy Spirit, and he prophesied over his child. In fact, this is the only part of this chapter, this first chapter, which Luke formally calls a prophecy. Zechariah prophesied, speaking under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. His prophecy offers to the reader a survey of salvation history, as did the words of the Virgin Mary in response to Elizabeth's blessing of praise. The prophecy of Zechariah gives us a glance back at what God had done to that point, a summary of the scriptures we might say, and a glance forward into what God would be doing in and through Zechariah's child. It is a glimpse at the story of redemption. God has visited and redeemed his people, we read. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of David his servant. He has spoken by the prophets of our being saved from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us. The promises of mercy, the holy covenant, and the oath he swore to our father Abraham are all alluded to. Delivered from our enemies, we would be enabled to serve him without fear all our days. That was the promise. And the story of the people offered token upon token of its final fulfillment. Then Zechariah's prophecy reaches its climax, gazing into the future. John is declared to be a prophet of God. He will go before the Lord to prepare his way. And here the point becomes explicit. His mission will be to give knowledge of salvation to his people in freedom from their sins. Chapter 1, verse 77. The past involved a revelation of the promises, the covenant, and the mercy of God in saving his people from their enemies. This salvation had a certain ambiguity about it. It involved political, social, and economic liberation, and as well as liberation to serve God according to the worship he required. Yet it always looked forward to a grander salvation yet. But now, Zechariah's prophecy explicitly mentions salvation from sin. In fact, it is the first time in the Gospel of St. Luke that the forgiveness of sins is referred to. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, the angel tells Joseph that he is to call the child Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. In the Gospel of St. Luke, the prophecy of Zechariah foretells that John will go ahead of the Lord to give them a knowledge of the salvation from sin that is coming. This then is the climax of the prophecy, and it sets the scene for the next scene of the Gospels, the birth of the Messiah at Bethlehem. Our Gospel today, in Luke chapter 1, verses 67 to 79, provides us with an inspired overview of the Old Testament and brings it to the very threshold of the New. Zechariah's prophecy could perhaps be regarded as of the order of the Psalms. Very many of the Psalms look back on the saving action of God, and with that action in mind, look to him in hope. In the utterance of Zechariah, the past is surveyed, and a future full of hope is presented. The redeeming action of God in the past is about to attain a new height and depth, for now sin, the greatest of man's enemies, is to be confronted. John is the herald of the coming victory. As we read, all this is the work of the kindness of our God. Zechariah continues, he shall visit us in his mercy, to light up the darkness of those in the shadow of death, and to bring us to peace. I would suggest that we read and reread the prophecy of Zechariah in this first chapter of St. Luke, using it to contemplate what God had done in the past and what he was about to do in the future. The entire Scriptures could be seen as encompassed in its rapid survey. It is a song of praise and of thanksgiving, which looks with great hope on what is to come. As such, it is timeless, and for that reason the Church uses it every day in her morning prayer of the Divine Office. Let us treasure this gift of the Holy Spirit, our Gospel today, the prophecy of Zechariah, and allow it to nourish our appreciation of all that God has done and is doing for us.